Hello, church, and happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Daily in the Word. Today, we're going to take our Bibles. If you'd like to follow along with me, I'm in James chapter 5. James chapter 5, I'm going to read a couple of verses for you here, starting in verse number 7. James 5, verses 7 and 8 say, "Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain." Verse 8, "Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh." I have a little funny story for you. A few of you have heard this story before, but for those of you who haven't, verse number 8 is actually my life verse. And if it doesn't seem like the most natural life verse in the world, that's understandable. The story of how that came to be my life verse goes something like this. When I was a child, probably still in elementary school or thereabouts, I began to realize that many of the people that I looked up to, my spiritual leaders, if you will, my pastors, my teachers, and other people that I looked up to spiritually, I began to realize that they had life verses. And I thought, well, if they have life verses, maybe I should get one for myself. But the problem was, as a child, I didn't really know how to get a life verse. I didn't understand how they had come to have the verse that they used as their life verse. I didn't understand how that had come to be. So I decided to take my Bible and basically I just flipped through it, and wherever I landed, I then plunked my finger down, and what I was pointing to became my life verse. Well, that was James 5, verse number 8. There are certainly other verses I could have landed on that would have been, let's say, much more awkward life verses. And I don't recommend this as the method to choose your life verse, but it is how I came to have mine, and you know what? I have stuck with it. In fact, you can't see it because it's behind the camera here, but on the wall right behind the camera is a plaque that has part of James 5, verse 8 on it that Allison Thompson, Pastor Scotty's wife, made for me. She's very artsy like that, and she made that for me when she realized this was my life verse. But it's James 5:8, "Be ye also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh." But if you see, the beginning of that verse says, "Be ye also patient." Well, what is it referring to? Well, it's referring back to verse number 7. "Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord." And then it tells this little story. "Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth." The husbandman is a gardener or a caretaker of a field or a vineyard or a farm, perhaps. But the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Now, if any of you are gardeners, and I don't consider myself much of a gardener, although I certainly have had some vegetable gardens, some fruit trees in my time. Erica and I grow these trees called plumeria trees. They're tropical trees that flower very beautiful flowers. If you've not heard of one, I encourage you to Google that. Beautiful flowers. But I'm not really a gardener per se. But some of you are, and you know that some plants take a long time to mature. You know, weeds, the stuff we don't want around, it just springs up, boom, overnight, and we have weeds and they grow fast and furious. But some things take a very long time. It takes time and patience to grow, say, an apple tree or a peach tree or whatever the case might be, to maturity, to see it bloom and ultimately to provide fruit. There are some plants that take many years to mature to a point of blooming for the first time. In fact, some of them are decades or even longer. It's kind of sad. Many of these plants that take this long to mature and to finally bloom, when they do, they just have a very short period of time where the plant has bloomed out and it looks beautiful and it has its flowers, and then oftentimes those end up dying. And I can't imagine being the gardener who grows such a tree or a plant of some sort. But the Bible says in verse number 7, "The husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit," he's patient, "and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain." So we understand this concept of the gardener being patient as he plants, he cultivates, he waits for the rain, and ultimately for the harvest or for the blooming. But then verse number 8 says, "Be ye also patient." So like this husbandman, you also should be patient. What goes on to say, "Establish your hearts," for what? "For the coming of the Lord draweth nigh." Establish your heart, or establish your heart, as we would say now. Why? Because the Lord is coming soon. I want to encourage you, Christian, as you're walking through life and things aren't always going our way, as things can be discouraging. And sometimes it's easy to get discouraged and wonder what the Lord is doing. Or you may even say to yourself, man, I wish all of this was just over and the Lord would come back. Well, the Lord is coming back. We don't know the day or the hour, but he does promise that he's going to do so. But he says, establish your hearts. Well, for the Christian, what does that mean? Let me make this recommendation to you. To establish your heart is to be prepared for his coming. What does that mean for you, practically speaking? Well, I encourage you to draw closer to him. Spend time in his word. Spend time praying and meditating. He wants to draw closer to you. It's going to be a much sweeter reunion when we are finally called to heaven, whether through death or through his second coming, when we see him and we're already close to him. Now, of course, it's going to be a sweet time one way or the other. The Lord is going to welcome us into his arms, and we look forward to that day when we get to spend the rest of eternity with him. But how much better would it be if we were already so close to him that to pass through into eternity, whether again through death or his second coming, is just a blink of an eye, and we're just going from this relationship that is now separated to a relationship that is face to face. So draw closer to him in the sense of spending time in his word, being one with who he has called you to be. Spend time praying and speaking to him directly and listening for his movement in your hearts. But can I also recommend this to you? The Lord is coming again. It says in verse number 8, the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. That should also encourage us to do something else. We have, many of us, friends and family members who are not saved. And the coming of the Lord drawing nigh really ought to put in our hearts a motivation to reach them, reach the lost for Christ, whether that be someone you already know, maybe someone you work with, maybe someone who is a neighbor, someone you live near in your neighborhood, maybe a family member. I'm sure you all have somebody in your life that you know doesn't know Christ. Well, as you draw closer to him and as we patiently await the coming of the Lord, I encourage you to let that be a motivation for you to win the lost so that they too can draw closer to him and be ready for his second coming. It's actually kind of funny that James 5:8 would be my life verse because it starts right off by saying, be ye also patient. And if you were to ask Erica, my wife, or any of my family, my brothers, my parents, if I was a patient person, they would resoundingly tell you that I am not. Patience is not one of my greatest strengths. It is something that I work on constantly. It is something that I pray that the Lord would help to cultivate and develop in my life. And by the way, if you're going to pray for the Lord to develop patience in your life, you better be prepared for him to do so, because he will. Patience is not one of my greatest strengths. As we've gone through this time of quarantine that finally we're starting to get out of, but if we've gone through this time of quarantine, I'm sure you've probably been impatient about many things, as I have, and one of those things has been just as simple as waiting for a haircut. I did finally get a haircut. I feel much better about myself, getting my hair, my beard trimmed up. I feel I look better, but I also I just feel better. And it's been hard to wait this long just for something as simple as a haircut. And I'm sure that you've been impatiently waiting for things as well. Well, can I encourage you to patiently wait for the Lord's return? Establish your heart. Draw closer to him. Spend time in his word. Get to know him better by speaking to him. Pray. Spend time in prayer with him. Spend time leading the lost to him, and be looking for his return, because he is coming again soon. Church, I hope this little bit of time we've spent in James 5, verses 7 and 8 is an encouragement to you. I hope that you're having a great Tuesday. I hope you have a great week. And we look forward to being with you again soon in person here in our church. Maybe that's the thing you've been impatiently waiting for. Well, that time is coming very, very soon as we begin to return to normal. But thank you so much for joining me for today's little devotion time. Look forward to another Daily in the Word devotion coming in just a couple of days. And until then, we love you, we miss you, have a great day.